This is Transfiguration Sunday, a day of light on many levels before the relative darkness of Lent. They go up high to the mountaintop, and his clothes were dazzling white. Boom! Did they expect this to happen, or did they expect some teaching per usual? I would venture a guess that they did not expect him to be bathed in light from within and without before them. And like most biblical figures, when confronted with the power of God, they were frightened. Transfigured is a technical Greek term for the act of metamorphosis, meaning a change in form, an effulgence from within, not a mere flooding of glory from without, according to an article in the Interpreter's Bible. It is as though someone is beaming as they hear good news, or like when they are in love, or when they look at their newborn. Matthew says that his face shone like the sun, and Luke says that he took them up on the mountaintop to pray, which is more typical of Jesus. He did start to pray, but then the appearance of his face changed. Mark writes that he was transfigured before them. Nothing specific about his face, but we know that transfiguring includes a change in form, so we can gather that his appearance changed. Thus, they all agree about his face changing, gathering light around it. What about the huts that Peter wants to build? They are reminiscent of the shelters that Orthodox Jews build to this day. And during the observation of Purim, a holiday in the autumn, I remember seeing them in Brooklyn as a child. They build them up in their backyards, and they just look like Old Testament. He might also have wanted to make this experience one that would last, thus the need for a shelter. I wonder what his reaction to God's words, "Listen to me," was. We don't hear what effect that had on the disciples, but the way things turned out, it seems that they didn't really listen. We're not privy to how the three trusted disciples heard the words from the cloud, if indeed they heard them at all, being dumbstruck. All of this begs a question that is always in our minds when we read about God speaking, whether from a cloud or to the prophets. Was this something that happened, or was it their transcendent experience rather than an objective event? Two other people who appear, Moses and Elijah, point to Jesus as being more than just a prophet or a rabbi. He was a prototype at this point of a Messiah, as was Moses, who had the same glow about his face when he presented the law. And Elijah, who was wrapped to heaven in a fiery cloud. Having these three together clearly points to a beginning of a messianic period. And the words from God seal the deal. The Israelites relied on the rains that came during planting and harvesting season. The clouds that appeared were a good omen. Clouds were good to see in the sky because they forecast rain. And this led them to seeing clouds as divine. Thus, the appearance of God in the cloud. This is not the only time that God has spoken out of a cloud in the Bible. Remember in the beginning of Mark's gospel, when God said, "This is my son, my beloved, with whom I am well pleased." Very personal. Unlike today's pronouncement. I often wonder how I would react were God in some way to say to me that God was pleased with me. Certainly my reaction or yours would not be Jesus's, but still I wonder. My first gut reaction would be to hide in a shadow, or at least to cower. Number one, because I had been chosen by God to hear those words, but a feeling of shame, I guess. A reacting by hiding my face. Not me, Lord. Couldn't be. But God is God. And if God were to say this to me in some way, wouldn't I have to accept those very words and perhaps even try to live up to them? I'm thinking that there would be a different reaction from each of you were this kind of thing to happen to you. I wonder if you would even believe what you were hearing. But back to today's words from God. This is my son, my beloved. Listen to him. Listen to him. Whenever God addressed Jesus, I think he reminds us that God is the Father and Jesus is the Son. But beyond that, he says, listen to him. I imagine God sounding very much like a father here, sternly telling them and us to listen to the words of Jesus. This is a warning of sorts. God knowing how they would not listen to him. Indeed, they would do more than not listen to him. They would despise him. They would disbelieve him. They would kill him. And I guess in part, that is because they did not listen to him. They may have heard his words, but did they take them to heart? No, because we know that their own egos were uppermost in their minds. His ascendancy threatened them in their social, religious positions. It's kind of amazing. The men on the mountaintop did listen to him. Well, Peter was questionable, but others did not. Were God's words to be broadcast to all the people? It seems not, because Jesus tells them just before they leave, as he often does, and I've wondered about that, why didn't he want his good deeds and call to compassion broadcast? I finally decided that it was because he knew his fate and didn't particularly want to hasten it by drawing attention to himself, as if all that he accomplished didn't do just that. The import of this passage is to let the disciples understand that Jesus was more than a prophet, more even than a healer, a miracle worker, a proponent of love. He indeed was God incarnate. Not specifically said, God did not say to the Jews as articulated in the 9th chapter of Isaiah and sung in Handel's Messiah. God did not say, this is your Redeemer, your wonderful counselor, your Prince of Peace, your Messiah, for whom you have been looking for all these years. All God says is listen to him. And because it was God speaking, that thought maybe should have been enough, but it wasn't. Not enough for the people of Israel, sadly. It might be enough for us who are here this wintry morning. We can only pray that it is. And for sure, if it were enough for the Putins of the world, we would indeed be saved. You're going to have a meeting this morning after church. You're not to leave your seats. Stay here for the meeting, and then you'll have treats in the parish hall, because I saw them. Whoa, the daughters of the king. Wow. So, when I wrote this, I wasn't thinking about you listening. But churches have divisions. People get riled up. Sometimes you end up not liking each other. But if you do that, you're not listening. you're not listening to your fellow people, and you're not listening to Jesus. So please take this with you, this listening thing. I heard once that God gave us 2 ears and only 1 mouth. So maybe we need to listen more than we need to talk. And I would love to listen to you, but it's my job to talk to you.